Hello and welcome to today's Fast Currents episode on the future of brand and reimagining of loyalty. I'm joined by Chow and Gweno, and we're going to be diving into the topic. So, as an agency, we see one big truth that brand is no longer what you say, it's really what people feel. And in today's digital experience space, your brand isn't a message, it's a relationship. Loyalty once was built on transactions, but it's now really built on trust, relevance, and shared values. And that technology has really removed friction. So now emotion is your competitive edge. If brand is becoming more human, what does that really mean for loyalty today?
I think what we have seen as a next evolution or next era where the brand should be is it's embodying more and more of the human-esque attributes. So the things that we have incorporated in our vocabulary in everyday life is that what is your brand expression? So what does your brand feel like? What does your brand sound like? So a lot of conversation that we're talking to, including the financial clients, including the entertainment clients, things that we would first to discuss is that if your brand were an agent or like a persona, what should the persona be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to build on that, the identity that people feel with regards to the way that they engage with brands has become super important. So, for example, if you are somebody who is really passionate about the environment and therefore you are choosing a brand or a product, even if it's dishwasher tablets or washing up liquid that is green and sustainable, there is a protection to that purchase and a loyalty there, because that is a part of your identity and you are connecting your identity as somebody who really values that with the identity of the brand.
So, would you consider that like Apple has its ecosystem, Nike has more of a community led kind of approach, and Patagonia's mission is really like mission driven identity? Um, how do these brands earn loyalty then beyond the product and price?
How can the brand be consistently communicated across their kind of ecosystem or the channels? Example that you brought in here with Apple or Nike or Patagonia is really be authentic. I think that's one of the key things that we want to address in here is really knowing who your consumers are and what they need.
Another angle that Ruth, you've already touched on there is community. And in all the brands that you've just referenced, Chow, as well, there is absolutely a link to community and the ability to identify with that community, but also engage. There's something really nice as well when you think about things like brands like Nike and the ecosystem, including elements like the Run Club, for example, where you've got that interaction between a digital community, but then also bringing that to life in the physical world. And I think where a brand can embed in both your physical world and your digital world, it becomes part of your behavior, it becomes innate in your identity and your day to day life.
So, what I'm hearing is that we really need to rethink what loyalty looks like and move away from loyalty being a reward to really a reflection of the brand's identity. I mean, what's your perspective on who's really doing well in this space, and maybe where is the space for improvement?
When the consumer is exposed to too many choices, it's sometimes really hard for them to differentiate, even to articulate exactly what they're after. So in that sense, consumer will no longer have the desire to be loyal to any specific brand.
The brand that sprung to mind as soon as you started talking there is Strava. So, for those of you who don't know, the brand Strava is fundamentally a fitness tracking app where you track your activities. Now, there is a huge movement, has been a huge movement over the last couple of years with regards to the growth of Strava and the level of engagement. And I think the really interesting thing that Strava has also done is it's taken the value associated to delivering or achieving a goal, your run, for example, but then it uses all of that data that it has on you based on your run, based on an accumulation of stats regarding your fitness, not only to encourage you to increase your activity where relevant and therefore engage with the brand even more, engage with the app even more, engage with its partners even more, but it also does things like, hey, you might need a rest here. You might be overdoing it. And there's something really nice there then in the development where there is almost a dependency on this brand in terms of behavior of recording activity. But because there's then a relationship, you actually start to really trust the engagement and the communication that you get from the brand.
So is it about designing micro communities based on customers' values so that they feel seen and therefore like not stacked like loyalty layers? Or how do we like inject those kind of micro moments into an experience to allow customers to kind of feel part of that community? How do you get moving on it?
Really, really understanding what your brand is authentically. And if you're a brand starting out, that's the most important thing. What do you stand for? And what does that mean, both in terms of the quality of your product and the way in which you want to engage with your consumers. Now, if for a brand new company, fundamentally, the number one thing that's going to be important to customers is the quality of your product, whether that's the physical product or the digital experience that sits around that, or the service that you're providing, or arguably all of the above across the different channels. But if you're not truly authentic and the brand isn't coming through really strongly, and you could potentially be everything to everyone, you're not going to be differentiated, and therefore there isn't going to be an emotional connection with you that's stronger than any other brand.
So how do brands start to choose that archetype and how do they lean into it to kind of prototype it and build that into the experience?
With our clients, the first step that we have established is to understand your loyalty literacy. So the framework that we are using, the loyalty reciprocity engine to map where the kind of like maturity of your loyalty, whether it's still existing in that space where the loyalty is more as an expression. So you express how your brand feel, you express how your brand move, or is it something to start to become more of an ecosystem? You start to create more of the channel strategy where your loyalty becomes part of everything that brand that connects your brand together. Or is it part of the platform? It's not just for the consumer, it's for your suppliers, is for your partners as well, where you become more of a platform for everyone come into play? Or is it more of a network and all the way to kind of elevating to what we call the loyalty as an ideology? I think when we start to look into the maturity of the organization or your loyalty offering, then we start to understand or unpack a little bit on the capability of what your organization is offering.
With all of that in mind, how do we create those digital experiences that really are emotionally intelligent? Because it feels like such a huge task for businesses to unpack.
Based on your brand and the knowledge that you have about your specific consumer, what are their unimagined needs? What are the things that they haven't even considered that they want yet? And based on those needs, it's understanding what is the role of each of the channels. And with the new role that agentic search is playing, for example, it is really important to make sure that you are considering where the roles of your channels might be changing and adapting to that, adapting to where your customers are within their ecosystem. I think if you're a smaller brand, you're going to have to do that analysis and follow what your customers are doing. You don't necessarily have the brand power at the moment necessarily to change that customer behavior. If you're a big brand with brand equity, you could be the first in the market to actually use a digital channel in a new way that hasn't been considered yet and hasn't been defined. That is an unimagined use of a digital channel that we might not see for the next 6 months. We might see it tomorrow because brands are today looking at how these channels need to change and looking at that relationship. But that's really important. It's also understanding if you have a physical product as well as a digital product or service, how does the balance change? Actually, because digital is becoming more comprehensive um, and even more personalized, should brands actually lean into that and gather more data digitally and or look at actually surfacing more content within the LLMs, for example, or in different digital channels? Or is it leaning the other way and thinking about actually how do we do more things physically within societies, within communities, but leverage the digital experiences to bolster the physical experiences as opposed to vice versa?
So you have to love your consumer in order to understand what they need. Therefore, you have a very clear vision and positioning of your company or your product services. I think that itself is already like 80% of the job done. I think the rest of the 20% is really understanding the weak signal of the market, right? So what we're looking at into the market itself, as I mentioned before, because of Web 2 now we're moving into Web 3, there's so many brands out there doing similar thing to what you are doing. So I think there is a question really understanding is so what would be the additional layers that you're offering? Not so much from a loyalty perspective, but more from an aggregation perspective. The conversation that we have internally is that some examples, such as instead of selling cars, you're selling mobility. Instead of selling pet food, you're selling the kind of the bond or the care with your pet. I think these are elements that we want to be able to elevate our conversation.
From brands designing for the next best action to brands actually not waiting for that engagement, but designing for the anticipation that's coming. And I think it's a real shift in both how we're looking at the data and analyzing it to actioning on it, which is a huge journey that I think many of us need to go on. So what are you doing to initiate that connection with your customer before they even ask? It's really about not waiting for that engagement, for designing for that anticipation, which sounds challenging, but if you break it down and stop thinking about it as a linear customer journey, but thinking about those connection points of how customers are feeling at different points when they're interacting with you as a brand, then I feel like the evolution of loyalty will naturally happen for you. So it's really about thinking about in loyalty in this new space. It's not a program that you need to consider anymore. It's a mirror. It's a real reflection of you as a brand and also how the customer feels when they're interacting with you as a brand. It reflects how deeply your brand understands you, your values, and evolves with the people it serves. So I think my lasting comment is make sure you're going back to your business and asking, what are we doing that designs for that value exchange?